Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to have you with us again on Novelists Unwind. My name is Johnnie Alexander, and I'm here today with Hillary Manton Lodge. I want to make sure I get that name right. And we're going to be talking about her novel, Jane of Austen, a novel of sweet tea and sensibility. And then we'll also be talking about some other things about Hillary's writing journey and her creativity, because she does a lot more than just write. So Hillary, welcome. So glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
It's really great. So we're going to start off just talking about your love for Jane Austen and how she's inspired you to write, and a little bit about your writing journey, how you got started, so forth and so on.
Sounds great. So my grandmother was a really big Jane Austen fan, and so my introduction to Jane actually started when I was quite young with the Laurence Olivier Greer Garson film adaptation of Pride and Prejudice.
I've seen that.
I love it, and that was my Pride and Prejudice, and I didn't realize it how historically inaccurate the costumes were until the 1995 Jennifer L. Colin Firth version, and it was like, their dresses aren't poofy. This is way too fun. And when that series was first airing, my grandparents lived a mile from my parents, and either my grandfather would come get me or my parents would drop me off. I was like 9 or 10. No, I was older than that. I don't know, 12.
Time goes, doesn't it? Yeah.
So every week for the duration of the miniseries, I would go and watch it with my grandparents, and my grandfather would make his version of an English meal, and my grandmother and I would watch, and my grandfather would come in and ask if they were dancing yet. There was always dancing. Is there dancing yet? And so that was really my earliest memories of Jane Austen in my life. And my grandmother was always shoving copies of Pride and Prejudice, this little paperback, and I wasn't really able to get through the verbiage through story until the advent of ebooks, because the thing with ebooks, and even on a phone, it just makes it so much smaller that it just breaks up the giant blocks of narrative.
Right.
So after that, I mean, I of course read some in high school for class, but began to read Austen for pleasure once I was able to, have it on my phone, have, things broken up, and you never lose your place in an ebook. So
That's true. That's true. That's interesting. I had never thought of it. I mean, like that, like you just had so much text on the page, it was a little daunting. And
yeah. I mean, and especially with Pride and Prejudice, I mean, it's very quick until you kind of get caught up in the whirl of the dialogue and the activity, but I was also really enjoying reading Persuasion and of course Sense and Sensibility.
So I like Persuasion too. That's one of my favorites. I can't remember the people's names. Yeah,
Anne Elliot, and
right. Yeah, I meant the character or the actors in the one, but there's one adaptation of that that's just beautiful.
The Amanda Root and Karen Hines one?
Probably. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And that's a lesser known. Are you any chance you'll be writing a book, a novel?
I've thought about it. I'm working on another adaptation that's kind of a spin on Pride and Prejudice, trying to look at it in kind of a fresh new way. But I really like the idea of working my way through her entire canon. So I've kind of had different ideas pinging for, how to approach Persuasion. I like adaptations because I think they're kind of an interesting framework. She was, of course, always looking at her own time, and it's very much a commentary on the mores and the customs, of her period, and kind of her complaints with them, which were, deeply valid, and kind of trying to find ways of saying, okay, if this is what she's, taking issue with in her time, what version of that are we dealing with 200 years later, because, there's nothing new under the sun. There's always some new iteration. And I'm always surprised when I'm going through and reading Sense and Sensibility, for instance, and I mean, all of these characters, there's a part where Fanny Dashwood meets Sir Middleton's wife, Mariah, and they kind of size each other up as, society mothers. And you sit there and you're like, oh, we know these women.
Yes.
These women still exist, and they're still judging each other, at Mommy and me. And the same thing for, Emma. Like, I think we have all, what's the minister's name? And Emma, it's just blanking. Mr. Elton. I do.
I have all the books right over here.
Mr. Elton. We have all almost dated Mr. Elton in high school.
Oh, that's funny.
So I've enjoyed working with Jane Austen's material very much, but it's always intimidating because she's so good and she's so clever, and there's so much stuffed between the lines. You've got your surface Jane Austen read, but there's always more waiting for you underneath.
That's true. And there's so many people doing different takes on it. So you want to come up with something new and fresh. So you've not done a Pride and Prejudice, am I right? Have you done it? But so the Sense and Sensibility, here we go again, Jane of Austen. And of course the Austen's a little bit of a play on words because it takes place in Austin, Texas. So, but it's more based on Sense and Sensibility. Is that your favorite of the books, or why did you choose that one?
So the book came about because my editor actually kind of came up with the title.
Okay.
And I contacted my agent, who contacted me. And my last two heroines that I had written Julia DeLisa for 3 books, and Sarah Burkholtz in Simply Sarah. Maybe it's Burkholder. It's been a while since I've written that book.
Yeah, show us if you got them.
Burkholder. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Are just very sensible, self-contained women, and I wanted to try to write somebody who was a little bit more of a loose cannon. And of all of your loose cannon characters within the Jane Austen canon, it's Marianne Dashwood. So it turns out I'm really not good at writing women who are kind of impulsive and loose cannon-ish, because I think my take on the title character of Jane is she's very emotional, but there's still just a lot of, she's still very sensible and pragmatic underneath the many. But yeah, so that's how Sense and Sensibility came to be. And I like the fact that it wasn't, one of the more common ones. I feel like people tend to reach for, Pride and Prejudice and Emma when they're updating.
That's true.
So, and with good reason. I mean, honestly, Sense and Sensibility is a little bit tough because they leave their home, Norland, for the Barton estate. They're in Barton Cottage. And they pretty much, other than when they go to London and come back, they're pretty much there in their home, kind of waiting for things to happen to them. Whereas, in Pride and Prejudice, you have all of these different, balls and stuff, and people are coming and going, and there's just your kind of plot struck. So that was definitely one of the challenges with updating it.
That's an interesting take on it too. Yeah, because because you have to have things happen so readers will keep turning the pages. So just to be in one place can be kind of hard. So did you, just as part of the writing process then, how much did you deconstruct Sense and Sensibility, or did you just have it so much in your mind you pick out certain plot points you knew you wanted to hit? How did you decide how to stay to that?
A bit of both. I did a close read of the original novel and did a lot of underlining and a lot of marking up of pages. But there would still be times when I'd be just stuck in a scene and be like, I don't know where to go from here. And I'd open up to where it was in the novel. And there would always be some little line of dialogue or just little bit of something that would springboard me into the next bit. It was definitely a development process. I tried streamlining it and having it be just the two sisters. So where in the original novel you've got Eleanor and Marianne, and Margaret, Margaret being the much younger sister, I was gonna try to just keep it with Jane, who's my version of Marianne, and Celia, who's my version of Eleanor. But it wasn't really quite working. We didn't have a reason for the two sisters to stay together. And so by adding a kid sister and Margot, that really kind of became the beating heart of the book. And Margot was, I think she was added. I mean, I was more than halfway done with the manuscript when I went back and retroactively added Margot.
Wow.
And I also didn't initially have Fanny Dashwood in it, who is Phoebe in this version. And again, you kind of need, that kind of slightly villainous character to kind of
you do.
And just kind of roll your eyes at, and Phoebe, she does it so well.
She does. I really enjoyed the book. I mean, I had a really good time reading it, and you trying to pick out it's like, oh yeah, I remember that, and I know what she's doing here, and that was all, just really, really cool. Tell us about Callum. Is that how you say his name?
Yes.
Yeah, the Colonel's.
Colonel Brandon.
Yes, thank you, Colonel Brandon's person in this novel. He's also he's a war hero and injured, and I think that's kind of cool because we don't often in contemporary novels see injured heroes. I mean, he's deeply injured, not just physically but also emotionally. So what was it like getting to know him?
It was a tricky character to write because I don't have military service members in my family, and I was really blessed that both my agent was a former Marine, and my line editor, who is also a good friend of mine, is retired from the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
So between the two of them, I was able to piece together what his rank would be, and kind of the ins and outs of his little bit of military background that we get on him. We don't get a whole lot. But it was definitely some tricky writing, trying to figure out how much to injure him, how to injure him, where to have him stationed, how that would all work out. And so I really love where it wound up, and I'm really pleased that it wound up the way that it did. And it was very much due to just the kindness of my agent, Sandra, and my line editor, Rachel Lilich, in kind of nurturing those details. I watched YouTube videos, amputee, patients, swimming, because Callum swims, and that becomes a big plot point that I love, and just watching them do different things, how to get the leg, I can't think of words.
I get that, yeah, but
yeah, his prosthetic, thank you, his prosthetic leg.
Yes.
How did that get on and off? And because he's kind of such a forlorn character, it was also partway through the book that I decided that he needed a dog, and a service dog, and and so added the character of Dash, who's of course named for the Dashwoods. And like Margot, Dash kind of added some extra beating heart, just kind of awe factor to the book, as he kind of pulls the best out of Callum, but also pulls some of the best out of Jane. So yeah, that was some of the more challenging research I've done, or books in the past, and that includes doing a lot of World War II research in the last series. So yeah.
That's really, it's really interesting to me how, we develop characters and they come to life like they do in developing stories. And and just all those decisions that have to be made. It's just like so many decisions to make this character be alive for the readers, and I don't know that people often realize that how much it's, some of it's intuitive, but then some of it you really have to dig deep and figure out how you're going to make this character be who you want him to be, and those kinds of details to make it authentic too. So yeah, kudos to you for that. And I love that you, okay, I will confess, I once wrote 70,000 words to a novel with a totally wrong premise. And I knew it wasn't working. I knew it. And, and then just to have to go back and kind of say, what is it? And then I was walking in a pasture, and finally, God's like, okay, this is it. And it's like, well, yeah, duh. I mean, it's like I should have known that all along. And going back and just doing what you have to do. But I mean, it's quite the process, right? But
it's quite the process. I liken it to construction on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I've had books where I have probably easily written a third of them during content edits. And you gut what you have to gut and shore up what you have to shore up, but I've always been proud of the final product. So
yeah, well, and as you should be. I mean, yeah, you should be. I did not know you wrote World War II books. What? Tell me about because I love that. Yeah.
My 3-book series, which I can only find one of them right here at the moment. This is the first one, and it's A Table by the Window.
Yeah.
And I think the title's flipped on a webcam. But it's the 2 Blue Doors books, and the World War II mystery comes out especially in the second and the third book. It's set up in the first one where the main character Juliet finds among her grandmother's belongings a photo of a young man who looks just like her brother, but it's not a photo she's seen before, and it's definitely not a photo of her grandfather.
Wow.
That kind of spurs a 3-book long journey for her, trying to figure out who is this man, and trying to find out between the story that they've been told about their genealogy and what really happened in France in World War II. There's some very difficult decisions.
Wow. I knew you wrote the 2 Blue Doors, and I love that name, the 2 Blue Doors series. I guess I hadn't gone there yet, so I was going to ask you about that anyway. So that's all together. Then the 2 Blue Doors series is the World War II.
So, yeah, the 2 Blue Doors was actually inspired by a stationery shop in St. Louis, Missouri that I found because I was going to the ACFW gala a few years back, and I had ordered a dress, gone to Memphis because we were traveling, had it altered. It was taken in too much, and I had to find 48 hours before the gala, I had to find a new seamstress in St. Louis who had taken it, who would let it back out so that I could get it.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
And there was this great little stationery shop called 2 Green Doors, and I just thought that was such a great name.
Yeah. So you had to change it, 2 Blue Doors.
2 Blue Doors. I like 2 and blue rhyming for some reason.
Yeah, I like that too. And it just is, it's cool. Yeah. We were driving in New Mexico this past summer and stopped at this little, you're driving and there's nothing, right? But then we come across this little place, this little store and gallery too, a little art gallery. And it had this beautiful blue door. I took pictures of it and put it on my website because it was just beautiful. It was a door though that it was in a fence, so you open that door and then there's this vista going down, so it wasn't actually into the house or into the building. But it was so cool. It was such a cool, and then so I guess now I kind of have a thing for blue doors.
I like them.
Yeah, I do too. It's just really cool. Okay, well, you started out as a journalist, right?
I started out studying journalism, and it's funny. I had an internship with a small regional food, wine, and travel magazine right out of college, and so that was kind of the time that I used my journalism background, but I really never intended to use it a great deal. I wanted to I wanted to have the writing background, but I didn't want to study English.
Okay.
So,
Despite your love for Jane Austen, you didn't want to study English.
well, my mom was an English major, and she was deeply scarred by Chaucer. So because of her Chaucer scars, which were deep, so I mean, it's a funny story, but as much as that really was the reason that I decided to pivot to journalism, because I figured I could write about the things I'm interested in. I'm so grateful for it because it set me up in so many ways for being able to put a book proposal together, being able to help put together a marketing plan. It launched me into the beginnings of my graphic design background, and so it's definitely paid dividends over and over.
That's great.
You know, even if it was begun for a slightly silly reason.
No, I think that's wonderful. Yeah, so you talked about the Food and Wine magazine, and of course there are recipes throughout. You showed again, Jane of Austen. So, are you a cook? Did you try out all these recipes?
Either I or one of my team of recipe testers have tested them, especially when I was doing Jane of Austen. I was in the midst of prepping our house, packing up, and moving to Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was kind of intense. And yeah, so I had some really wonderful, trustworthy recipe testers that I'm so grateful for. But yes, I started learning to cook in college because I babysat all through high school and college, and at a certain point you can only eat so much boxed macaroni.
Yes. Yeah.
To cook and to cook with things that I could find easily. And then when I came and interned for the magazine, they would ask me to test recipes for them. I think it was like my second day there, I was doing like this sweet potato butter recipe.
Oh, wow.
Lots of butter.
Lots of butter. Makes it
good. Like a pound of butter. Yeah. So that really kind of opened my world into this really specific kind of funny world of, cuisine and foodies. And we would have, chefs come in and, do demos. And I would just listen to them talk because they were so passionate about it and it was so specific. And, he'd ask for his wife to bring him his fish tweezers. And I was like, fish tweezers are a thing? Okay. And I would write notes, and there's notes, of that very much kind of fed into the idea of Juliet for the two Blue Doors books. So yeah, and one of the reasons we were really excited about the Jane of Austen idea was because Austin has so much of, a local food scene, and getting to explore that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so you said it in Austin, not living there. So did you get to visit? And
I did get to visit, and we drove across the country to get to Memphis, and yeah, just ate a lot of breakfast tacos.
Okay, but you detoured because you came from. I was gonna say you didn't drive. You had to detour to get to Austin, right?
Yeah, we started in Vancouver, north of Portland, went down because it was in the dead of winter, so we went down anyway. And we were just on all these random highways.
Oh, cool.
And I was so excited when we got to Roswell not because of aliens, but it was the first Starbucks, 48 hours. So it was exciting, but
that's a cool trip. I mean, I love to do road trips, so to me that sounds like it's just a lot of fun to make that kind of trip. But to go all the way down to Austin and then go back north to Yeah.
And that was when there was a giant ice storm too, so we had to extra detour because 40 was closed. Yeah. But it was really fun to be in Austin also because I think we were heading to Austin when my aunt texted and said, that your grandmother grew up playing on the steps of the Capitol building because your great grandfather was a state auditor. And I said, I did not know. That was not in my packet. But that was one of the things I really wanted to do. And, you know, there was really no reason to work any of the capital into this story. But it was really fun for the sake of my own family history to go and know that, you know, this is where my grandmother played and this is where my great grandfather worked. And that was a lot of fun. It's a great Capitol building.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah, and you can really tell, I mean, by the way you present Austin in the book, that, you know, you at least done research and knew. I mean, you get the sense of it being very real, you know, and authentic, and I like that too. And
it was a fun place to research.
Yeah, but, you know, by the street names and buildings and the food places and that kind, you know, mentioning those kinds of places by name, I think that's awesome. Really
Spent a lot of time with Google Maps.
I bet you did. That's really cool. Well, Hillary's not only a fabulous writer and also a foodie, she's also a great designer. And I'm going to encourage everyone to find her. I'll put a link in the notes for your Instagram account, because it's just beautiful. She does all these fun pictures. She designs different memes, and then she's got these two very adorable Cavalier King Charles spaniels, and they show up in her photos too. And all of this has led you to open your own Etsy store. So yeah, tell us about your Etsy store.
It's new, but it's fun, and I have just one of my little prints. Kind of see it. It's very badly lit, but it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
Yes, we all love that.
But yeah, I first started, you know, learning to use Photoshop when I was in college, and learning digital photography. I actually had a small photography business for a while straight out of college. And so after Table by the Window released, I started making my own promotional graphics, and just got more and more into the promotional graphics to the point where it was like, this is fun. I can make these and put these up for sale, and, you know, and do some fun things with them. So yeah, I've just really enjoyed it, and I've started doing book covers. Melissa Tagg's new Christmas novella collection. I did that one.
Good.
I've got a couple other covers that are coming down the pipe.
I saw on your website that it's Simply Sarah and Plain Jane.
Simply Sarah and Plain Jane.
And those covers, I mean, I just was very drawn to them. They were just beautiful. So did you do those?
I did.
Yeah, you did those. They're beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love. So those are my first two books, and they're kind of contemporary, funny Amish, I guess is the best. Not your grandmother's Amish is what we kept calling them.
Funny Amish. I love that. That's like a subgenre you don't hear too often.
It's like a sub.
I love it. Okay. Wow. But yeah, the covers are really pretty, and I mean, there's a simplicity to the covers, but they're just, I mean, they're just very eye-catching. I love the font and you know, just the way the picture was on there. Sort of,
yeah, I love how they turned out. That was kind of a new technique that I figured out how to do, and really nice. I'm really kind of in love with them. But yeah, so those readers can be looking forward to those books being re-released soon with the pretty covers. So
if you like contemporary funny Amish.
If you like contemporary funny, I mean, and I've had people, I actually had somebody who told me that she picked up a copy of Jane because she was trying to get a handle on, you know, what Amish fiction was like, and I was like, no, that's like the worst one to pick up, because I was intentionally making it like as like nobody else does this in Amish fiction.
Oh my god!
I mean, like there's Star Trek references.
Wow.
And so I don't know. They're really similar to the Two Blue Doors and a Jane. There's just a lot of family dynamic. Funny. There's still food in them, although there are no recipes at this point. So yeah,
well, that is a nice added touch to have. I mean, and I don't cook, but there were some in here. I was like, well, yeah, you know, it'd be fun to try those out. And I probably never will, but that's just because I don't really get into cooking and baking. But yeah, it was a nice touch, I thought, to the book to add. And the teas, I mean, that was really interesting too. There's you must either be a connoisseur of tea or you did a lot of research on that too.
Bit of both. I can't really drink caffeinated tea, and true tea drinkers, and I mean true tea only comes from the Camellia sinensis plant. I may or may not have said that correctly.
I would not know.
So within that family, you've got your green, your black, your white, what have you teas. I can only drink decaf or herbal teas. So there was definitely research that went in, but I drank a lot of tea, and I need to drive like 45 minutes across town to buy more loose leaf tea bags. Because I'm just about out. So.
Wow. Yeah, that was cool. And that was a cool thing. So, again, I'm not much of a tea drinker either, or coffee. I like hot chocolate. That's about it. But it was still very fascinating to me how she took care of the plants, and and how important those were, of course, to the business, and the way she would concoct these new teas, and by bringing different things together, and knew what they would help do. Like, this is what you need because of whatever.
Right.
You need this and this in your tea, and I'm going to make that for you. So it was just really, it was fun. Hillary, thank you so much. Multi-talented, Lodge, writer, foodie, tea connoisseur, and now book designer, and also just does a great job with graphics and all of that. It's great. So one last question. You type the end. What do you do to unwind after finishing a novel?
That is a good question. Generally, by the time I finish a book, I usually have like a list of things to do floating around. And generally, I am so completely depleted that I can't even find the list.
Yeah.
I like to move around when I'm done, because generally by the time you've gotten a book finished, you have like hardly moved for like a month. So I like getting active. I like taking walks and getting outside, and seeing people, and kind of, doing all the things that you can't do when you're sitting in your office.
When that deadline is right there, and you're going,
the deadline right there.
Closer.
And I like to eat real food, because generally I've been cooking a lot. So, like, actual nutritional value. Yeah.
Yeah, not Kraft macaroni and cheese.
No. Not takeout. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks so much for being here. So once again, if you've not read it, Jane of Austen, and also you've got your copy too. And the other one, show us the other one again, the table at the window.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yes. Beautiful cover. That's a beautiful cover too. They're both great. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And everybody, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again on Novelists Unwind.